The four Gospels are a monomyth. People can't see that. I can. What I've been doing is kind of working on establishing how in Abrahamic material there's a background code and a numbering pattern. You'd have to look through my videos, and if you're following, you already know what I'm talking about. Okay, so recently I did a kind of an introduction on looking at the book of Mark and interpreting it as a monomyth, how it plays out in the psyche, and introducing people to that idea. And I didn't get very far into it, but Paul said, hey, I'd like to hear more on that. So I think what I would like to do is go back and do that again, only this time I'm going to go to a deeper layer. When I first covered it, I left something out that needs to be included in. And I'll go ahead and do that in this video. My name is Dan Paulson. Welcome. All right, what I've got up here is a copy of the Gospel of Mark on my desktop. And if I go ahead and take a look at, there's a portion here right in the beginning that I talked about in the other one. In the beginning of the Gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. As it is written in the prophets, behold, I send my messenger before your face, which shall prepare the way before you. That when you're telling stories like this, that there's a point where we have to understand what that is. It's kind of an introduction. I said that last time. It's like if you took a book and there was no cover on it, and it was just the pages. It started. You didn't know who wrote it. You didn't know what it was about or anything like that. So these are coming around word of mouth, and the same thing would be there. If I've got a story to tell you in the beginning, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Where is the story coming from? What's it called? Who wrote it? What's it about? So that's going to be up front. But you know what? There's more to that line than what I said. There's something deeper in there. This is where it's going to get fun. I'm going to have to go wander around to a few other places to look at something. There's a concept happening right here that we're going to spot elsewhere, and I think it'll be more comfortable mentally for us to go do that. So what I'm going to do is I'll stay inside of Abrahamic material, but let's go back to some old Jewish material. Let's take a look at some Ezekiel and some Joshua. Now, before just jumping into reading it, though, there's something very important to understand, that a monomyth is played out in the mind. It's like going to the movies and somebody saying, here's the movie, memorize this story. Now, take your brain, which is your theater, and go sit someplace and play it out. That's how it has to work. All of the people, all of the places, everything in that story is analogous to something about our life. It's an inward path. It's about me. It's about you. The monomyth picks up the moment you say, I see what's happened in life. I'm tired. I've judged things. I've become a product of this. I realize that now. I can detach from that and not live through that emotional turmoil. I can have a better life. I can have a better experience. I can reattach to what God really is. Feel wonderful in life right now. I want to turn inward and resolve that. Bingo. Right there, you just became called hero on the monomyth. Whoever is in that story, Ezekiel, Joshua, this is where it gets tough. Jesus, yeah, you have to become that person. That doesn't mean you are becoming that physical individual. It means you are following the path that individual has set forth. You're following the same pathway as them. So when we're following a monomyth, we need to, when we're interpreting it, know that. As we're looking at Ezekiel, you are Ezekiel. And of course, that's what I mean by saying that like if you're following the Jesus monomyth, you're not really becoming Jesus. What you're doing is reading the story and pretending as the story is playing out that your consciousness is along with Jesus's consciousness, that whatever he's doing is what you're doing. However, you have to interpret what is there. What he's doing is not at face value. Those miracles and things like that, all of these are spiritual teachings that have to come from the physical world and be understood as the spiritual thing that happens in the mind. It's not a physical thing. An example of that is like this. There's the story about Jesus who kills the fig tree because it's not putting out fruit. It's out of season. Depending on, you put all the versions together and you find out that they came upon a fig tree in the travels. Jesus is hungry. The fig tree is not producing. It's not even in season for it. So out of anger, he commands the fig tree to die, and by the next day it's dead, and they're all like marveling over this. Whoa, what manner is this? You should in your own mind be going, okay, if I was really hungry, why wouldn't I have just made it heavily laden full of figs? If I was Jesus in that instance, I would not have instantly thought, you tree, you die. I would have said, you tree, be full of ice cream cones. Well, okay, I wouldn't have known about that. I would have had figs or something. So the story doesn't quite work right. So how does it work then? You become Jesus in a in a manner where your consciousness is now, you're looking at the things that are emerging from your garden. You've got something that is emerging from you that's not producing. It's a part of a waste of life. It's taking time. It's taking resources. It's making you unhappy. It's creating a bad life. I'm not talking about things that we need to be okay with that we're responsible for. I'm talking about people that are just things that we're hanging on to that's too much. You got to let it go. Get rid of it. The fig tree represents something growing from our life experience. And in this case, out of season even. We know something is, I don't have to wait for this thing to come up and be a problem anymore. I need to get rid of it now. It's out of season. It's not even a problem right now. Drop it. Okay, so these become psychological teachings in that way. I call them spiritual, but what is spiritual? Spiritual is a combination of judged experience, the manner in which you hold it emotionally, and the resultant emotional baggage or experience that is a result of it. Pull up the memory. What does it make you feel like? Yep, there you go. That's spiritual. It's based in the flow of our life, and the way that our spiritual experience happens on this planet is based in mental processes. We need to know that, or we're not going to interact with it. Spiritual is mental. If we don't get there, we're not going to interact with this material. Seriously, think about it. If God, who sees in secret, is to reward you in secret for having forgiven the ought against your brother, that's a mental process, period. Any story like that, we become the person. We become Noah. We become Abram. We become Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. If we don't play it out in the mind, we're not going to understand it. That's the way they are made. We also can't understand them because we don't have them memorized. We are very detached from this. I'm going to be using the computer to supplement what they knew, and it's going to fall short of doing the best job possible. I have a tough time coming up with analogous examples. It's a memorization thing. It's knowing how many times words, nouns, verbs, and phrases have been repeated in a story. It's exactly important, and it's crucial to know how many names. Sometimes you might have Isaac's name said 60 times in Genesis. Yeah. Would you know that? The deep memorization to know that, and to know how many times Sarai's name was said, 17. To know how many times Noah's name is said, 41. To know that there are sequences in here that I only know them by habitually looking at them, but I've got a handful of them that I've got memorized out of thousands that we could look up with the computer. We are very far removed from understanding this material. Please understand that. When you watch me, you're not going to understand it until you play it out in your mind. All you're going to do is watch me or listen to me give instructions on how it works. But it's not going to make sense until it becomes something that is experiential, not just academic. The Tao, you know that one? Verse 1, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. Interpret that. What is the eternal Tao? The Tao that is understood, that is taken. The real pathway is the pathway that is taken. If you're listening to somebody preach, that's a blind leading the blind. This is an inner path. When you take that inner path, you're not following anyone anymore. You're following the material. You're following the path that was laid out in the material. All right, there's many layers to what I'm looking at, and you're going to see some notes and highlights and things that I've got in here for my own study, for my own purposes. They're things that I've learned. But here's what we have. Now it came to pass on the 30th year in the 4th month on the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river of Chebar, that the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. In the 5th day of the month, which was the 5th year of King Jehoiakim's captivity, the word of the Lord came expressly unto the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar. The land of the Lord was there upon him. All right, what we have here is some numbers that I've got those from a different source. I'm going to leave those out. I have to use that numbering pattern to help me, though. But something that I recognize right off the bat is the river of Chebar. Chebar being said 8 times in the river, that's a crossing right there. That's a river crossing. This is a certain time and a certain person. The son of Buzi is the person who is called, the one individual who is called. He's called to cross a river. This is going to be you. You're going to become the son of Buzi, the priest. It'll move on. Anyway, I just want to get into the beginning of the story right here. So this is how it starts. This is representing the 30th, 4th, and the 5th day of the month. This represents the time for purity to begin. It's time to cross the threshold to turn inward. I am going to become this individual on the 5th day of the 5th month. Look, 5th said 3 times. There's coding going on. I'll leave that numbering out. The word of the Lord 60 times. There's our 60 again. We're going to find repeating things in here that are just too consistent to look away from. What we're going to be doing, we are this person. It is now time. It's pure. We're going to cross a threshold and turn inward. That's how this is going to work. Then it's going to get into much deeper. It's a huge story. But that right there is the beginning of it. Do you recognize that? And look at what do we know about the son of Buzi his entire life? Nothing. He shows up as an adult ready to go. We don't know anything about Ezekiel until Ezekiel is called by God. What about Noah? Same thing. We don't know about his childhood at all. Now, it's important to know that that's only when we're talking about the monomyth. Jesus is the monomyth. When you look through, you see there is no childhood for Jesus. That would be like if you took Jesus and started him at the calling, like when Moses was on Mount Horeb. However, we know that there's a life going on there. We got a little bit of a life for Jesus, actually, in some of the other Gospels, but not very much. From the age of 12 or something at the last, at some point, I think it's in Luke that he's mentioned at 12 in the temple, but from then on he disappears until the age of 30. So what is this void? There's videos out there on him going to different places. Go look at much earlier, Jason and the Argonauts, and the adventure begins. What about Jason's life? He's singled out as a child, but after that, you don't know anything about him until it's time to show up for the adventure. Same thing as Jesus. He's singled out as a child, then he disappears off the scene until it's time for the adventure. That's a common motif. Here, look at this again. The word of the Lord came expressly to the priest of Buzi. This is selecting one individual. It's just one. But it's the word of the Lord. It's the connection with the higher awareness. This is something that's very important. We're going to see that God shows up and talks to you. God is happy with this person here. Let's look in Mark for the same thing. What we're going to see right here is right as the baptism happens, this is his crossing of the threshold that we have, and a voice came from heaven saying, Thou art my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. So we have the connection of God with the person at the crossing of the threshold happening. All right, we'll find that that's a commonly reoccurring motif. Whenever the monomyth starts, it's also exclusive selection to this person. We saw that with Noah. Noah was righteous. That's a very early version of one. How come one person is selected out and God shows up at that time? God disappeared at the Cain and Abel, shows up when it's time for the calling. So that is a common motif. And when I say motif, I need to be careful. I mean conceptual motif. The simplest motif would be like if you're reading through a story and somebody has something they're repeating ominous, something throughout the story. And after each one, it might say something like, and it was so. And then later on, and it was so. And then later on, something else, and it was so. So that's a repeating motif that's super simple. In a conceptual repeating motif, it would be something like an anchored ship cannot sail. The dog tied in the yard cannot run away. The goat chained in the field cannot escape. All of those have a repeating conceptual motif, and that is that something is attached through something and cannot escape from it. So that's what we're looking for. When I say repeating motifs in cases like this, you might go, that didn't sound the same. You're looking for a deeper understanding, a conceptual repeating motif. Not the story itself, not the words themselves, but the idea that this God figure has been gone and reappears and selects one person right there, and it's time to cross a threshold. That's the repeating conceptual motif. All right, Moses' threshold was the flood. Jesus was a baptism. We often see river, but it's common that it's water somehow. It can sound a little bit different. The Noah's Ark story has a purpose. It's a monomyth. All right, I'm going to jump into Joshua, and we're just going to look for the same things. They might not be right next to each other, but they're going to be very close. They're going to be all here at the beginning of the story. Remember that these Old Testament ones, these old Jewish stories are huge. They're really big. They've got a lot of steps, a lot of details in them that when we get down into the Gospels, we find by comparison they're a lot simpler. Okay, so as we get in here after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass. So this is a transition from the old self to new self. Moses died off, and now Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore go, rise over the Jordan. So look at the river crossing. In this case, it's 70. 70 is a good count. 70 is a good number that we picked up. That's the first number that we gathered from the sevens in Genesis, actually. Then all his people into the land, which I do give you, even to the children of Israel. Okay, in this case, you can represent crossing that threshold as a good thing or a bad thing. It's crossing into a place where bad stuff is, so it can be made to sound like a bad thing. At the same time, you can make it sound like a good thing because you go, even though you're going to go and start facing enemies, that's a good thing to do. And when you get done, you're going to emerge. So it depends on the story and how it's going to be written. A person can make it sound good or make it sound bad. Look at Pharaoh, for example, when we are reading Genesis 12. Abram and Sarai represents our early self. This is a life cycle. Abram the conscious, Sarai the inner self. And Pharaoh represents life experience. We give up our inner self and we become corrupt by life experience. But Pharaoh tells us, man, I see what's going on. I got plagues here. Get out of here, you liars. Pharaoh was the good guy. We see a repeating motif as soon as we get to Exodus. But what happens instead of Pharaoh being the good guy telling him, you guys lied to me, get out of here? He's like, no, you can't leave. You got to stay here. So in both cases, they represent early life experience. In one case, it's saying you better move on. In the other case, it's saying you're not getting out of here. You have to look at them that way and understand that the story can be written from different perspectives. That's what makes them sound so different. When you learn to play them out in the mind is the only way it works. That's why I say you have to learn to do this on your own before you go, okay, I see what's going on. It's an inner comprehension thing that has to come online with the understanding of how they're shifting concepts and playing it out. It's taken me years to figure it out. All right, you're going to see here why I had to do that first. Let's jump back over to Mark, and what we're going to see here is a very strange shift, but it's doing the same thing. The beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Who is going to be Jesus Christ, and what's the Son of God? Our consciousness is, let's stop right now. What is God? All right. God is a part of our consciousness that does not exist through our memories. We can sit here and do that. Go sit and think about your memories. Think of the things you don't have resolved. Think of the things that you have coming up that you're like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do over this. Think of those and feel the experience. You're going to be like, oh my God, I'm really caught up in this. Now, mentally start thinking through, step outside yourself, step back, look at a bigger picture, look at life, look at beyond life, look at other things going on in the world. Take things into a bigger perspective until you get to the point where you can look at those things and go, wow, I'm living through my memories and my fears and my experiences. Here's another way to spot God. At night when you're having turmoil, 3, 4 in the morning, and you can't get something resolved and your mind keeps shifting around, it's going to be going through all this mental turmoil, but periodically you have a voice stepping in that is unsolicited. It is unsolicited. It comes in on its own and tells you, hey, you got to sleep. There's nothing you can do. Now, it could be a part of our own consciousness that knows better. But what it is who and what we are that isn't the memories. So we think about it, what's happening is we're lying there in bed, tossing and turning, that the consciousness is experiencing the turmoil. It's getting caught up in all of the things that it has to resolve, but there's nothing it can do at that moment to resolve it, but it's caught up and it's having that experience. So it's building emotions, it's feeling emotions, it's in turmoil, it doesn't feel good. But that other voice that steps in is detached from it. That right there is God. That comes in unsolicited, and that is what we must do when that emerges. We must stop and go, oh, I need to stop allowing myself to shift back into the memories and stop and sit here. I might not be able to fall back asleep, but I should not remain, as long as I'm awake, I should not be sitting here just practicing turmoil. If I'm going to be here awake, then let me feel peace. So you connect yourself. You make the conscious decision to not slip back into that. Anyway, all right. So practice it, play with that, learn it, step outside yourself, look at yourself from a distance, see yourself living life. That's the higher awareness. That's the connection to God. That's what we're having to do right here. when that is happening. That is how we're going to go address the memories, because we're going to understand from this perspective that we're not the memories, that those are memories. They're enemies that we have to go defeat, but this is who I really am. So you have to make this reconnection at this point. Campbell doesn't have that in any of his material. He's got a atonement with the Father later on, but that has nothing to do with what's really happening. What we've got going on right here is the connection to the reconnection with God. That's the reconnection with the higher self if we're playing it out in the psyche. We have to do that. We're going on an adventure. Here's some of the requirements. You got to bring the higher awareness. You have to know what it is and how to employ it. That's how we're going to defeat the enemies. All right, so with all that out, let's look at it again. In the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. In the beginning of the gospel. Gospel is repeated 8 times. Gospel is representing the pathway. In the beginning of the pathway of whoever this is, the consciousness of the higher awareness. This is your adventure. This is more than just announcing where it's coming from or setting it up. This is actually telling you something. It's the beginning of your adventure. It's time to cross the threshold. Make sure you are with the higher awareness. As it is written in the prophets, behold, I send my messenger before your face, which shall prepare the way before you. All right, so this one is kind of weird. This one should play out in the psyche. As it is written in the prophets, behold, I send my messenger before your face, which shall prepare the way before you. That's this material right here. This is the messenger. Then we're going to get caught up in our 3-7 combo grids here. 3, the voice. Voice is said 7 times in the entire book of Mark. The voice of one crying in the wilderness. That's you going, oh, my God, what the hell has my life become? Prepare the way of the Lord. Make his path straight. We have to leave behind what we're doing. It's a body of work. There's many steps. It's a lifestyle. John did baptize in the wilderness and preach the baptism of repentance to the remission of sins. So this is John teaching about, actually John represents the early self. John is our early self. And I'm not going to cover it extensively, but you see down there 7, and preach saying, there cometh one, mightier than after me. That was a breakthrough I made recently. I've been going for the nouns and verbs. I've recently realized that it can be concepts. There cometh one. There cometh one is repeated 3 times. So, that was a breakthrough that helped me to open up what they're doing here a little bit more. This, however, underscores the importance of what it would be like to have it memorized. I still can't think of a good analogy. Imagine bicycle wheels, and you go to some guy that makes bicycle wheels in the bicycle shop, and you tell him, my bike, because you counted the spokes on your front wheel, and you tell him, I need 32 spokes this length, but I need front and back, so I need 64. And the person already knows you need 32 for the front, but your back wheel has a different dish to it. So it's got 2 different sizes, one this short, one this length, and one this length. In order to create that, you need 3 different sizes. There's things that's even a poor example. I'm trying to think of some way that somebody that knows something at a very deep level is going to know things like all at the same time. They don't have to stop and target in on one thing at the, what is this? What is that? I don't know how to describe it. This whole thing is in their mind at the same time because they've got it memorized. We're just going in and grabbing little bits and pieces of it and trying to put it in place. We're not getting it. I'm not getting it to the depth that they have it. And we are going to be left behind. So what I want to do is stop the video at that point, or at this point, and really talk about that first section right there to show the detail that was left out, but also how to hook into it. As we get into it, it's really important to understand how this thing plays out in the psyche. And without setting that up first, I think it's very foreign to, it's a difficult concept. There's so many times along the way as I'm reading this, I would look at something and go, it must work that way. But I would think to myself, no way, that's not possible. That I'm goofing up. And I try, and it's like, that's the only thing that works. It's so simple, really? All these complicated stories are about me. Destruction of Jericho, that's destroying my early self. John getting his head cut off, that's your early belief system being gone completely now. John was rough, dressed in rough stuff and eating wild honey. That harkens all the way back to Gilgamesh and Enki. But we see it in Genesis with Esau and is it Jacob or Isaac? Okay. At any rate, we see that where the early self, the early one, is like the one that's more primitive. What happens in Cain and Abel? There's one that manages the animals and one that manages the crops. Who moves on? The one that manages the animals, the hairy one, the hairy beast. There's hints there of that same concept. This is our early self that needs to give way to a later self. Anyway, okay, so that's how we have to hook into the material. Are you okay with that? This is going to be, as you get into it then, it becomes very deep. There's no quick way to go through it. Honestly, to go through an interpretation is going to take many hours. And that's okay, but it has to go through slow. There's a lot of things that play through. But I'm also describing it mentally where, again, the person has to look at it and go, okay, John represents my early self. That baptism represents me turning inward. That being in the wilderness for 40 days for Jesus. What happens to the Israelites? They cross the Red Sea in their 40 years in the desert. See the recurring motif there? Cross a threshold, turn inward. 40. 40 is one of the numbers collected. And it represents pure state. Becoming healed again. That's why the rains came for 40 days and 40 nights. Yeah, that there's more in the numbering pattern than what we see, that it becomes very complicated. I don't know. I'm just rambling on here at some point. I think I make it worse by trying to describe it, honestly. There has to be a certain mind that goes, I see something there, I want to understand it, that works at it, and then has the time to do it. That's all I can say. I can describe this, and I realize the futility in thinking there's going to be comprehension. There won't be comprehension. If somebody explained it to me, I would not comprehend it based on their describing it to me, explaining it to me. If they gave me all the details, I realize I would not know what they're talking about until I sat down and went, okay, I see what's going on. I'm going to practice that old technique. I'm going to sit down and do what they were doing in antiquity. If you don't do that, the story's not going to work. It will not work. It plays out in the psyche, and that takes time. You got to wire your brain to do it, but that's what they were doing. They did not have media, but they had this. Anyway, all right, well, how's it sound? You interested? Should I continue on? Are you okay with that? This is how a monomyth works, but we're going to recognize certain things in there that lets me know that this is a monomyth. I have no doubts about what this is. Anyway, okay. Comments, questions? I'll see you in the next video.